שובי נפשי למנוחייכי, שובי נפשי למנוחייכי, כי אדוני גמל עלייכי. שובי נפשי למנוחייכי, שובי נפשי למנוחייכי, כי אדוני גמל עלייכי. כחילצת נפשי ממוות את עיני, מן דמעת רגלי מדחי. יא לילה לילה יא לילה לילה לילה
Good evening again, and welcome to everyone who came from close and from afar. And especially thank you, Benjamin, for coming and joining here tonight.
Thank you. ממש תודה בשביל ההזדמנות.
And it's a real opportunity to have you here as a person with two hats, both the hat of the rabbi and both the hat of a novelist, a fiction writer, and we will speak about how those two correspond, if and when they correspond. But I want to start. I want to start with some sort of way the hard thing, because Benjamin is the author of the novel The Next Stop, which portray a pretty dark future for the world in generally, and especially for the Jewish world. It is a dystopia. It is happening in a very dark form of future, and it's getting darker and darker. And my first question to you is, haven't the Jewish people suffered enough? Haven't the Jewish people suffered enough? I mean, why do Jews keep imagining the catastrophes? Haven't we experienced enough catastrophes already?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think, you know, in the Diana Lamasha and Amirit, you know, I mean, I think as fiction, right, you could ask the same question of Yeshayahu. I mean, you know, like, or Yirmiyahu, that you know, that sort of invite us to think through kind of very, very challenging experiences. And one of the things, so my favorite holiday by far is Pesach, and it's not particularly close. I find Leil HaSeder to be sort of like just absolutely thrilling. Like when you, after all the work and you finally sit down, I just find it to be, and of course it's also the most child-centered holiday. I mean, the whole point of the Haggadah is what, educators call a provocation. It's to stimulate kids to ask questions so that you can brainwash them with the story that tells them like who exactly they are. And a very core piece of that story, not the only piece of that story, but a very core piece of that story is V'yisham lavotenu v'lanu. This is what is promised to our ancestors and to us. Shelo echad bilvad amar aleinu l'chanotenu, ela shel b'chol dor v'dor amnim aleinu l'chalotenu. Right? And ve'akadosh baruch hu yatzilenu miyadam. Right? Which means, however you understand that, theologically, it means that we're going to still be here to re-experience both the trauma of our destruction and also kind of our enduring that and then rebuilding afterwards. And this is what we tell our children. I mean, this is what, like in my house, we sing this in a very kind of jaunty tune, but it's actually a really, really frightening thing. And, I think this has been a central aspect of the Jewish story for a very long time, and I think it remains so. And I think it remains. And so I think it's a worthwhile story to tell. Although I'll share also one of the pieces of the book that people sometimes find interesting in terms of the history of how the book came into the world was that. So the book, how many have read the book? Very few. So the book, one of the precipitating events in the book, and this happens off screen, sort of before the book begins, is a sort of a black hole, a sinkhole opens up and swallows Israel.
Oh, how wonderful.
And the ensuing story is about the story is about a sort of a Jewish family in an unnamed American city navigating an anti-Semitic hysteria sort of in the long wake of that event. And sort of a feature of the history of the book, it was submitted to my editor on October 3rd, 2023.
Oh, wow.
And so even though I wrote the book, completely before October 7th, it's the book came into the world in that context and exists to this point in that context. I mean, one day, hopefully it'll exist in other contexts. It'll be around forever because now it's in Hebrew, which is the eternal language of the Jews, which is why I'm so happy it's in Hebrew. But I mean, I don't know if you don't read it, but it'll be around for a while. But right now it exists in that kind of context. And so I do worry about what it means, especially for our children, to keep hearing these kinds of stories. And I'll share one other thing that we can go on talking about. This is nothing to do with the book. This has to do with just me as a Jew. So, and as a parent. So I'm also a pulpit rabbi, and I wrote this book. And my wife, Felissa, is the editor-in-chief of the Jewish Telegraphic Agency. And we have never been particularly careful about what we say around our children. Maybe we should be, but we're not. And our children are 11 and 8, and so around October 7th, they were, 8, 9 and 5 and whatever. And because of both my wife and I's work, there were very few conversations, and this I'm sure this describes maybe everyone in the room, but for several months, 6 months, there were very few conversations that we had with one another. Because what do you talk about with your spouse? You talk about your work, you talk about your day and whatever, and that didn't touch on really, really horrible kinds of things. And at least, I mean, here in the immediate aftermath of October 7th, everyone was, of course, steeped in it because you were living here. For Jewish professionals in America, we were steeped in it in a somewhat different way, which is to say that it wasn't necessarily that all of my congregants were thinking and talking about that all day long, but that's what they were talking to me about all day long. So it wasn't, so they would come and talk about it with me, and then they would go have their day. But so for me, I was just it not in the same way as you, but in a different kind of way. I was just sitting in it all day, every day, for months and months and months and months and months. And it probably was February or March. And I woke, I was really, really upset, acutely upset about this particular thing. I woke my wife up in the middle of the night, and I said, do you think the kids know that Daddy thinks being a Jew is the best thing in the whole world? I was really acutely worried that they didn't know that. And my wife, who's like less given to like dark nights of the soul than I am, was like, go to sleep again. Fine, go to just stop bothering me. But I was very worried about that. And so the question that you ask is, I think, it's a really profound one. Like, is the Seder a good experience for our kids? I think it is. But it is also a very scary story. Yeah, so
no PG-13 on the thing.
no, it is not. It's not. It's a really scary story. And we try to make it, I mean, of course, Seder is supposed to be fun, and it is fun. It's a joyful story too. Jewish experience is not only, there was a 20th century, an important 20th century historian named Salo Baron, who coined the phrase the lachrymose conception of Jewish history. Lachrymose means ear-drenched. And actually, he coined the phrase as a way of arguing against it. He maintained that this was actually a real error to think about Jewish history as a movement from one tragedy to another. And he actually maintained this after he lost, I believe, his sister and his parents in Auschwitz. He still maintained that it was wrong to understand Jewish history as lachrymose, which is sort of quite extraordinary. I think he was originally from Austria. And while I think I think he's right that Jewish history isn't only lachrymose. It's not. There are wonderful parts about Jewish history. But I think he is wrong. But I think it is right that Jewish history has been lachrymose. Like, that is also an important aspect of what Jewish history has been. And so I wanted to tell a story about that. And I don't think it's out, for those of you who have read it, I mean, I won't give away spoilers or whatever. I don't see it as a hopeless book. I see it as a hopeful book in some ways, but a book in which some admittedly very bad things happen to people that I care about. My characters.
And maybe continuing on that idea of storytelling in the Seder, we were wondering, as a fictional book that you wrote, what is the role that you see of the imagination? Maybe the imagination also as expressing fears and hopes, and also has that, do you feel that maybe after writing the book or through the book, has this developed something in your rabbinical role as a storyteller?
Those are two different questions. I'm going to answer the second part first, then I'll think about the imagination a little bit. Those are both great questions. So rabbis are storytellers in all kinds of ways. I mean, there's at least 4 rabbis in the room. Are there more?
Yeah.
There's more than 4.
Yeah.
How many rabbis are in the room? There's 5, at least 5, 6, 7. Yeah, okay, yeah. I knew that. There are more. So I'd be curious. We're gonna hopefully we'll open up to questions of people. I mean, rabbis are storytellers in all kinds of interesting ways. I will say that the kind of storytelling I do when I'm a rabbi, when I'm wearing my rabbi hat, which is this hat. I really do wear this hat. Same hat. I wear it both as a rabbi. It's too hot though, first of all. The kind of storytelling that I do as a rabbi feels to me to be very different from the kind of storytelling that I do when I'm working on a book. And I'll say I'm not making like a sort of a philosophical claim about language right now, but I'm just going to say how it feels to me, which is that when I'm telling stories as a rabbi, I very much don't feel as though I'm trying to be original. I actually think originality is not the currency, the main currency of the rabbinic storytelling. I think what we're trying to do, what I think I'm trying to do when I'm telling stories as a rabbi, is I'm trying to, in the same way that, a musician will play a piece of music by Mozart and another musician will play another, the same piece by Mozart and have a slightly different interpretation. Okay, but it's still Mozart, right? On some level. It's not that the musician doesn't add something crucial to the playing of the piece, but it's still minuet in G, let's say, okay? That's sort of how I think about rabbinic storytelling, right? You're trying to be a voice and an instrument of this ancient tradition in a way that people can hear it and that it pierces the ear and that people carry it forward. And there's a transformative process there, but it's also a process where, at least in my mind, I'm not trying to say something new necessarily. I mean, there are chidushim and whatever, but not okay. When I'm writing a fiction, on the other hand, at least in my head, and this is where I'm saying I'm not making a philosophical point. If you're like a if you're like a postmodern language person and you say, well, but nothing's really original, not everything's really okay, good, and there's only certain stories, I grant you. That's true, probably. But at least in my head, I'm starting with a blank page. And I don't have any, it's whatever I want to, wherever my imagination goes. So that feels very, 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 very different to me. And when I write stories or tell stories for sermons, in part because sermons, you just give them, it's a lot of material, as some of you guys know, it's constant, it's very fast, and I write them quickly and fluidly, and then I leave them behind. Writing fiction is sort of a long, arduous process. It's work. It's heavy lifting for me. I don't write. If you ever seen movies where the writer's like in the zone, and that never happens for me. I don't know if it happens for some writers, but it certainly never happens for me. And then in terms of the imagination, I don't know if this is, maybe we'll talk about this later too, but this is what it made me think about. So, I think, so the novel includes some speculative elements and some science fiction kinds of elements. And one thing that I've thought about is sort of the role of that genre exactly, and why I was drawn to that, at least for this story. And I think the imagination, the Rambam had a decidedly mixed and ambivalent relationship with Koach HaMidameh, right? Which for him was different from like Koach HaSeichel or something like that. And like Koach HaMidameh was dangerous because I think he, and I'm not a Rambam scholar, there are people in the room I'm sure know more about Rambam than me, but I think the Koach HaMidameh, the power of imagination, or the imaginative faculty is probably how it would be translated in like a Rambam thing. And because it could lead you, I think he acknowledged that the power of the imagination could be productive and generative, but it could also lead you astray and lead you down dark corridors or it leads you into error. And I think that, certainly speculative fiction, but any kind of fiction in general, I mean, you can use it to, for instance, explore very dark things, or to explore very wonderful, or try to imagine very wonderful things. And I think if you think about Jewish speculative fiction, I thought about this a lot in the wake of my book coming out, and also in the wake of October 7th. There was a video. There's an Israeli like folk singer named Yoni Bloch. People know who that is. Some people know who that is. He, like, at some point after October 7th, he released this little YouTube video with a song called, I think the song is called Sof Tov, a good ending. And the first line of the song is Bo Natchil im Sof Tov. Let's begin with a happy ending. And the song and the video, which is all AI generated, it's sort of sci-fi. It's sort of him singing, and it imagines like there's peace in the Middle East. And there's a Levantine trail that runs from Egypt all the way through Damascus, and all the flags are waving together, and there's peace between all the different countries, and it's like, let's imagine, and Israel wins the World Cup, and there are two very peculiar things about the movie. One sort of darkly peculiar and one sort of amusing. The darkly peculiar thing is, and if you watch this movie, which I commend to all of you, it's sort of an interesting work of speculative fiction. The Palestinians are nowhere in this movie, which is strange, I think. If you're imagining peace throughout the land in the Middle East and there's absolutely nothing about the Palestinians, I mean, perhaps that expresses part of the vision, but that's a little bit strange. A little bit dark. The funny thing that's strange is that the very end of the video, which seems to be the apex of peace on earth and Bon Homie and like the apex of what he can imagine as a perfect world, it's him and Taylor Swift sharing the stage together, and they embrace, and it's like, okay, I don't know Yoni Bluff, but I was like, okay, that's a nice fantasy, I get it. That's a little bit strange. But it's an interesting piece of speculative fiction, and what it does is it uses the genre of speculative fiction, and it uses imagination to imagine something really, really, really wonderful. And okay, let's use speculative fiction to imagine something wonderful. Also, so a sort of a counterexample that I think of in this context. So there was does anyone know who Stanislaw Lem was?
Say it again.
Stanislaw Lem.
Stanislaw is
drama
method.
He wrote not Stanislav. That's Stanislavski. Who's Stanislaw Lem wrote Polaris is the thing he's probably most well known for. He was a Holocaust survivor. I think he was Polish originally, and he wrote these mostly these very, very disturbing science fiction novels, usually involving there's a New Yorker article, I forgot the name of the person who wrote it, if you're interested in this, who makes this argument. But he wrote these extremely disturbing science fiction novels about these sort of alien intelligences that treat humans in really horrible kinds of ways. And he was a survivor. And the first novel that he wrote, which he could not publish, was a straight novel about the camps, like about his experience in the camps. And he couldn't publish it because no one wanted to read it, or no one could read it, or whatever. And I'm not saying you couldn't write such a novel or whatever, but no one. And so he turned to speculative fiction and to imagination as a way of exploring and working through some of these really dark ideas. And so I think you can do both of the, so I think you can see both of those kinds of things. And I think you see it also in what some people call some people, I don't know if this is really true, it might be the first time travel story in human history, might actually be the story of Moshe and Rabbi Akiva's Beit Midrash, where God zaps Moshe. Moshe is wondering why there are these little crowns on the letters in the Torah, and so God zaps him forward, I guess 1,000 years or whatever, more 1,500 years or whatever, to Rabbi Akiva's Beit Midrash, and Moshe is initially upset because he doesn't understand what's going on, but finally Rabbi Akiva says, and all of this is like a halacha leMoshe Sinai, and then he feels good and he's happy about it, and so it's this nice story about Torah unfolding and whatever, and it's a wonderful work of speculative fiction, right? And in the same story, the next thing that happens is he says, show me the man. He says, first of all, he says to God, you have a man such as this, and you chose to give the Torah to me. And God says, basically, shut up. That's what I decided. Don't bother me. And then Moshe says, well, I want to see his reward. And then so he zips him forward future, and he's being martyred by the Romans. And so Moshe says, you have such a man, and this is his reward. And God basically says, again, shut up. This is what I decided. So you have right there in the same story, you have both this imagining this wonderful flourishing of Jewish, learning or whatever and culture, and then you have in the same story this very dark ending. So in one piece of early sci-fi, ancient sci-fi, you have both of those kind of impulses. So that was a long answer, but it was sort of about imagination.
Yes, I'm wondering if even maybe in this story one can feel that maybe there are more concepts, and maybe imagination allows for more nuance, maybe even then when we speak about current events. I'm thinking even maybe about Rabbi Nachman, who maybe represents the storyteller that in difficult times actually found that storytelling was maybe more of a space for conversation. Wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, no, Nachman's a really good example. I mean, Nachman was a fascinating writer, and as you know, towards the end of his career, he turned to stories in addition to his other modes of teaching. I think because he thought he could express something that way in ways that he couldn't express otherwise. I also think for Nachman, this is true for me too, I think he was just interested in it. Like I think one of the interesting about this is I don't know, this is the point about storytelling, it's the point about Nachman. At one point, I was working on like a PhD in Nachman, and it's gonna have to wait for a new Gilgul at this point because I'm not doing that anymore. But Nachman was of all of the Hasidic Rebbes, sort of a person of really kind of, I think, restless genius, and he just he didn't. I think in some ways just being a Rebbe wasn't probably enough to keep his mind. Like he really had so much. He was an artist, and I think that's part of what motivated him to tell stories too. That he was just clearly interested in the activity of storytelling and just the art of storytelling, and delighted in the power of it, and so on and so forth. And I think he thought rightly that he was able to communicate things in a different way that reach people in a different way, and he wrote some great short stories. He wrote some amazing. I mean, the chicken one. I mean, he wrote some amazing stories, the famous ones, but also some of the ones that are less famous. So I commend that to all of them. Really weird.
And in your book, Ben, right at the beginning, we as you were saying, there's like a sinkhole that swallows Israel up.
Yep.
And then the story really is about this couple, right? About the couple, Ella and Ethan, and a question that was the reason of Israel being swallowed up right at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Is that to enable focusing on the community in the States and the US? Is that to enable basically to see how a Jewish identity navigate itself without Israel? What was the reason of kind of getting rid of Israel from the start in the book?
So Lav Dafka. I wanted to, so I didn't set out to write a story about anti-Semitism. I initially wanted to write a story about parenting. And so one of the story of the book, I won't give away the plot, the story of the book, 15 years after Israel has been destroyed, there are sort of similar black holes opening up around the world, and there's conspiracy theories about how they relate to the Jews, and there's basically sort of a rising hysteria of anti-Semitism in this American city, in the context of which a couple, Ethan and Ella, meet and have a love affair, and Ella has a young child from another marriage. And so the story is about sort of a love affair between Ethan and Ella, but it's also about a love affair between Ethan and Ella's young son, Michael, as he sort of becomes a father to him. And so So the story is very much about parenting, and in many ways it's sort of a domestic story. It's a love story and it's a story about parenting. So I wanted to tell a story about parenting, and I started to write the story in 2021, sort of at the tail end of the pandemic, and I wanted to tell a story about parenting under rather extreme pressures. So my kids were, they're 11 and 8 now. So in the pandemic, they were, in kindergarten and preschool, and anyone who had kids during the pandemic, like, it was a particular challenge. I mean, I always say that I was blessed with a wonderful pandemic in the sense that I didn't lose anyone and I had the resources to keep myself safe and whatever. But even the most wonderful pandemic was a really terrible pandemic. And it was particularly hard with kids and whatever, and we were trapped at home. So I wanted to tell a story about parenting under really belachats, like really under pressure. And eventually, as I was starting to tell the story, I started to be a story about the pressure became this kind of anti-Semitic kind of hysteria, which is something that I was also thinking about. So it became a story about anti-Semitism. And initially, the reason why, and I want to tell a story about sort of the hishamda, like the fact that Jewish being in the world is precarious, like not only precarious, but it is precarious. And so, and I actually think one of the really wounding things psychologically, not to mention physically, about October 7th is that sort of like the reality of Jewish vulnerability is sort of super palpable here and there. And with that, like that's just like such a palpable thing now. And part of the original promise of Zionism was that wouldn't be, right? We were opting out of that. Right, that was part of, I think, the psychic wound of October 7th. But originally Israel had to not be in the story because you couldn't really tell a story about anti-Semitism in America because readers would just say, why don't they just go to Israel? Right, because that's the promise of this place. But I mean, the promise of this place remains unfulfilled. I mean, and so I suppose part of what I was thinking about before, and I was actually very concerned, and happily, almost no readers have read the book as like an anti-Zionist. I was concerned about that actually in the wake of October 7th, that people were going to think that like somehow this was I was wanting Israel to not true. Okay, I mean, but and people they haven't really read it that way. But I think it's unquestionably the case that like of the places in the world where there are a lot of Jews living, the place where you're most likely to be harmed physically because you're a Jew is here. Like for sure. I think it's safer probably to be Jewish psychologically here, maybe. But it's much more dangerous physically. Certainly than it is in New York. Much, much, much more dangerous. It's not even close. And that's and so I was thinking about that too. And that promise that we're opting out of that. I still believe in that, by the way. I actually still believe in that as an aspiration. I think this place might still be that, but it is not yet. And so I was thinking about that too.
Let's take it from the book to an actual catastrophe.
Yeah.
Like we have a taste now after the last 3 years, but generally, I was reading about this disappearance of Israel, and it made me wonder if catastrophe, a Jewish catastrophe, do you think it's something that will bring us, the Jews in Israel and the Jews in America and around the world, do you think it will bring us closer or it will spread the gap between us?
I don't know. I mean, I think we've already seen it do both. I mean, I think one of the things, maybe Yoshua, who I'm a great admirer of, and actually quite sympathetic he had a lot of harsh things to say about the diaspora. He liked to come to the diaspora and kind of poke us. And I'm actually, as someone who lives in the diaspora, I'm actually quite sympathetic to a lot of what he says. I actually find some of his sort of shlilat hagolah stuff very convincing. But one of the things that he said in different ways over the years was that for you in the diaspora, your Judaism is like your clothing and mine is like my skin. Sometimes you talk about clothing and skin. Sometimes you talk about volume. Okay. In the diaspora, you can turn the volume up on your Judaism or you can turn it down. Here the volume's pretty high. Always pretty high. Okay. I think one of the things that happened for a lot of Jews in the diaspora, and by the way, I'm like a rabbi, so the volume, my volume's turned up pretty high. I'm always at like an 11 anyways. But I think one of the things that happened, and I know this from talking to friends, I have friends who are not so involved in Jewish life and whatever, and people have written about this and observed this, but like one thing I think happened for a lot of Jews in the diaspora who maybe who had the volume turned down pretty low, was suddenly it was ratcheted up, not because they turned it up, but because the world turned it up for them. And there was this sense of, oh my God, like the peoplehood thing is real. That's real. I mean, everyone in this room probably knows it's real, and a lot of Jews know it's real, but some Jews, like, that's like a real thing. And so like the volume was turned way high up for a lot of American Jews. And I think, pace what A.B. Yoshua said, like it turns out actually that so Judaism is even in America is more like our skin than we thought, maybe, right? I think that that's true. And I think that you've seen, and so I think for some American Jews, there's been a drawing closer and a drawing together, right? And but also like you're seeing Jews who are like in the diaspora making choices that I don't need. Haven't we suffered? And I don't need this. Like not only do I not need it, I actually think it's bad, whatever. Like that's a real thing. Like it's not like, so like most synagogues, not mine actually. I am blessed by not having any anti-Zionists in my shul with which I have to contend, but probably the other, which American rabbis in the room have people in the shul that they have to deal with? Yeah, that's like a real thing. It's not like everyone, but it's a real thing, right? It's challenging, and it's not bringing us closer together. I don't think. I mean, it's challenging.
Reading your book after the last 3 years, after being part of such a life-changing moment that we are all living through it, and there were few things in the book that I read and I said, it seems familiar to me. It seems familiar to me from the last 3 years, and I would like to hear your point of view about it. One of the things, as Ben said, the book is telling the story of Ethan and Ella, a couple, and they are facing a world that is changing, a world that is collapsing, and there is always this alternative beside hanging onto the world to go down to the underworld, because it's like a sinking hole. And in many ways, the book really bring the conversation of staying and fighting for what we have, or giving up and just going down. I won't go too much into details because you should read the book. But what made it interesting for me is that in the relationship between Ethan and Ella, in different times of the story, in different moments in the story, we see that one of them is leaning more toward hope, toward we will stay here and it will be okay. And another one is leaning into despair, into let's finish it and go go ahead. But what makes it interesting is that during the plot, they are switching sides, even more than once.
Yeah.
And in many ways, when one is hopeful, the other is
Despair.
kind of despair, and the other way around, and it is something that felt very familiar for me. First from us during this time of war, but it's something that I also spoke with friends um, that many times we allow ourselves for one to hold the hope for the other.
Yeah.
And it's really helpful that like I know that Amirit is the hopeful one today. So I'm allow myself to fall down and it is important part because part of resilience is knowing that we cannot keep ourselves 100% shaped all of the time. We need this downtime. So this ability to keep the hope and not to keep it only for yourself, but keeping it also so other one can take a detour to other places. Is it something that you had in mind?
Absolutely. And that also was drawn from my experience of the pandemic, actually. One of the things that I noticed with my wife and I was that we would have shifting senses of like what was going on and like what we should do. And again, I mean, it wasn't war, but it was it was traumatic. I mean, it was a traumatic time, and we were not always on the same page. We really weren't. And it was challenge. Not only was it, I think what you said is such a nice spin on it, which I think it was true that like, okay, one of us is hopeful and the other one can allow themselves to be less so. But it was also sort of a challenge because it was like we were not totally aligned. It was like we were both kind of moving targets because it was so hard to process what was going on and things were changing very rapidly and I think there's a sense in which some of these events that like the veneer of our normal like everyday lives really very thin. Like it's very easy for there to be these like big disruptions, and it sort of overwhelms, I think, on some level our ability to process it. And then we end up changing and shifting. And I think in relationships it's very challenging. I mean, I think another thing that I think about with the book, and a question that I ask myself a lot throughout the book is whether Ethan and Ella would be together under normal circumstances. I don't know the answer to that question. And that too actually was sort of a legacy of the pandemic. You know, there were lots of stories about people who have been dating for a few months and they say, well, okay, I guess we're living together now, and for better or for worse. I mean, I don't know. And so that was something that I was thinking about a lot too. I mean, they're compatible, but I don't know if they're, I won't give away more than that, but
And another picture that looked familiar was again, I will not tell the whole context, but the world is collapsing, everything is changing, and Michael, the little boy, is a bit more than 5, and his whole life changed, and then suddenly there is a moment in which he is developing new friendships and new friendships, and especially the friendships are those friends from the buildings, the neighbors from the building. And here in Israel, some people has a mamad, a safe room within the house, and other people went into a bomb shelter that is of the building or of the neighborhood. And what happened in that shelter, at least uh, uh, for uh, for families with kids, was exactly that the children really found one another, developed friendship, and the outcome of this friendship, in some sort of way, was their ability to see this craziness
Yeah.
as some sort of game, as something.
I remember children, מתי אנחנו יכולים לחזור לממ"ד or משהו כזה.
Yeah.
What
Yes,
children
yes.
ask, when can we go back? I heard.
Yeah, when
Yeah.
our girls, when there was just an alert and no siren, they were disappointed.
Yeah.
We're gonna see our- We said we can also meet together as the
Right.
building even
I
without
heard
the
that
siren.
story from many of his friends. Yeah. Yeah.
And but as a result of being together in the bomb shelter, they
Yeah.
do start to meet also.
Strange. Wonderful, but
Afterwards.
strange.
Mm.
Strange. Yeah. Yeah, no, Michael, I mean, it's true. I mean, Michael was, I like writing children a lot. And one of the things I've gotten very nice, consistent in some of the reviews and I've gotten really nice feedback about Michael as a character. And I think it's important, I think, for me anyways, to take children very seriously as characters, which I think a lot of writers don't. I think one reason why is because it's hard to write children, in part because I think children, especially young children, change very rapidly. So if you're writing a book, that spans a couple of years, your adult characters might be reasonably stable. I mean, things happen to them and whatever, and maybe they change. But a 5-year-old is very different actually from a 6-year-old and then a 7-year-old and an 8-year-old. And so I tried to be very careful to have Michael grow and change in the book. And I think he does. And so people have enjoyed the characterization of Mike, and that was a really important part of the book to me, to sort of show him having these new experiences and changing. And yeah, people asked me if I was going to write a sequel, what it would be about. And I don't think I'm ever going to write a sequel to this book, but I'm curious about what Michael's, I guess that gives away something about the ending, but I'm curious about what Michael's doing now.
And I want to invite if there are questions from the audience into this conversation. Yes, David.
Yeah.
I'm only 3/4 of the way through. I got on Kindle today. It's 75%. So I know it's exactly 3/4. I want to go back to what you said at the beginning about Pesach being a scary story.
Yeah.
Indeed, but it has a happy ending.
Yeah.
Unless there's a huge change in the trajectory of Next Stop, I can't imagine it having a happy ending. It sounds like a very scary story. And for me, you said that there were things that seemed very familiar to you. What seemed familiar to me, even though I never lived through it, it's for me is as if you're describing what families were going through in 1930s Germany. Should we leave? Should we not leave? It's going to get better. Don't worry. This is going to pass. And others saying, no, we had to get out of here now. We don't even.
Yeah.
And the other one saying, but it's unknown what's out there. And the other one saying, that's okay.
Yeah.
Got to be better than what we're here. And you said in the beginning that it could be the concern about it being a dark story is it could have been, you could say that about Yirmiyahu. And you're only a rabbi at this point and not a prophet. But I'm worried.
For sure.
I'm worried that your book is indeed prophecy. That catastrophic picture that you paint of what's happening in America,
Yeah.
it's so much for me parallels what happens in Germany, is not going to have a happy ending. Don't tell me if it does.
I was
but,
well, I will tell you that I mean I don't think I wrote a book about the end of the Jews. I mean I don't I mean it's called Next Stop. It's not called a Tachana Achrona. It's a Tachana Haba. It's the next stop. I mean, which whatever. I think that gives away something about the ending. But you know, but people have seen the ending in different ways. People have seen the ending in different ways. The ending is somewhat ambiguous, I think. Yeah, no, I do not claim the mantle of prophecy. But I mean, I don't know. What is a prophet? I mean, I don't know what your phenomenology or your theology or phenomenology of prophecy is, but I mean, a prophet, I think, is someone who, you know, sees the world and is looking out at the world and takes in the world and then says something about it through inspiration, wherever that comes from. And as you know, there were a lot of prophets in Yeshayahu's day. There were guilds. There were hundreds of them. It was a job. And they were all saying different things. And it was Yeshayahu who happened to, I don't know, hit on the thing that was eternal, I guess. And look, I don't know that Next Stop hit on the thing. I highly doubt that Next Stop hit on the thing that was eternal. But I'll also tell you something, quoting, and you're also a writer, I know, and I'll tell you, this quoting the great and not yet late, you should know, Cynthia Ozick, who is 98 years young and still writing, and she's a great American. She's I think the greatest living American Jewish novelist. And she said in an essay called Toward a New Yiddish in the 70s that no writer of any seriousness aims to be mediocre. Like no writer is trying to be mediocre. All of us are trying to be Yeshayahu, right? That's the dream. All of us want to enter the canon. All of us imagine that one day, 200 years hence, students will be forced to read the thing that we've made up. Now, most of us don't get there. I think it's highly unlikely that anyone's going to be reading Next Stop in 200 years. But I think that's what the prophets try to do too. Like they're trying to say something about the world, and you know, sometimes it comes. I mean, you know, I don't know. Sometimes it comes true, and yeah.
Quick comment, Cynthia Ozick also wrote Mazel Tov on the translation.
Yeah.
Talking to Amos Oz.
Yeah.
She was jealous of him, and he said, "You're jealous of me," and she said, "Yes, you're writing in Hebrew. Your book can be eternal. I'm writing in English."
Yes.
It'll be something
Yeah.
else."
So
So Mazel Tov.
this is yes. You have I have a lot to say about that. Do you have a question? But I have a lot to say about that.
Okay, so I'm saying that, I just have comments, so might not again. Two, I thought it was already from the description, I did not know it even existed. Very Zionist book.
Yeah.
You had to get rid of the solution before you got to the problem. And if it's similar to the Holocaust, it couldn't have been written without getting rid of the solution.
Right.
Therefore, you can add that to your response thing. If anything, this is a wildly Zionistic book.
I see it that way as well.
Okay. And in that regard, just two quick comments in terms of your responses. No one's killed here because they're a Jew. They're killed here because they're in the state of Israel and building the state of Israel and living in the state of Israel. And a lot more people are killed because they're Jews outside of Israel. They're not killed because they're Jews here. And any more than people in the ghetto, the Warsaw ghetto, were killed in the camps. Different thinking altogether. It's a different category. And
Interesting.
two, the skin thing is a misrepresentation of, he didn't mean just you feel it all the time. He means you can't escape it in any minute. And
Yeah, that's what I meant by that.
Unless you're a snake, in which case you
Yeah.
can shed your skin.
Yeah, that's what I meant by that. I mean, that's how I understood what he said.
Okay, just those tones.
Yeah. No, I've always understood him to say that there's no, right, it's part of my body. I'm not, right. Yeah, it's nothing I can share. Yeah, no, that I've always understood. That's interesting, your point about, I don't know if you and I entirely agree about that. That's okay.
Yeah,
That's very interesting. I thank you for sharing that. I need to think much more about that before I even respond to that. I appreciate that. To your point about the eternality of Hebrew, I didn't know that Cynthia Ozick had that exchange with Amos Oz.
It's an introduction to that 3 stories, the blood.
Oh, it is? Yeah, so I think she's absolutely right. And I, in my conversations with most of my Israeli novelist friends, of whom I have a few, all of them desperately want to be in English because it's a larger audience.
Wow.
And they're jealous of me that I write in English.
Yeah.
And I tell them, I've had the exact same conversation with my friend Ido Geffen, who wrote a wonderful book called Chof Yerushalayim, and another wonderful book called Hamifal Ananim Shel Gveret Lilienblum. I said I feel exactly the same way. I'm horribly jealous of him all the time, that he writes and thinks in Hebrew. אני מצטער שאנחנו מדברים עכשיו באנגלית. אני חושב שכדאי לנו לדבר עברית בארץ. ואני רוצה להגיד לכם משהו על העובדה הקטנה בתמול שלשום של ש"י עגנון, שזה רק סעיף קטן על יצחק קומר, שבא לארץ, והוא לא רגיל לאכול זיתים ועגבניות. מפני שהוא מגרמניה, אני חושב, והוא לא רגיל בזה. והם, בראשונה, הם מגעילים בשבילו. אבל זה סעיף קטן שעגנון כותב שהוא כן אוכל אותם, מפני שבארץ אתה צריך לאכול מה שהארץ נותנת לו. צריך לאכול מה שהארץ נותנת לו. בסוף הדבר הוא לומד לאכול, איך לאכול זיתים ועגבניות. וזה עובדה בשביל זה מאוד מרגש. ואמת. אז תסתכלו, התחנה הבאה יצאה לאור לפני חודשיים או משהו כזה בעברית. והתרגום הוא נפלא על ידי דבי אילון, שהיא מדהימה. היא מתרגמת מחיפה, והיא מדהימה. ואתם יכולים לקרוא את הספר או באנגלית או באנגלית, או בעברית או באנגלית, אבל אתם צריכים לדעת בעיניים שלי, הגרסה בעברית היא ממש יותר חשובה מהגרסה באנגלית. זה מפני שתי סיבות. סיבה אחת, שזה, תסתכלו, אני לא הרמב"ם. אני לא חושב שאני הרמב"ם. הרמב"ם כתב בעברית, מפני שהוא כן חשב שהוא הרמב"ם, שבעוד 1000 שנים אנשים כן יקראו את הספרים שלו, ואז כן, זה קרה, אוקיי? He was the רמב"ם. אבל הוא כתב בעברית, לא מפני שהוא לא ידע איזה שפה יהודים בעתיד ידברו, אבל הוא הניח הם כן יקראו עברית. והוא צודק. אוקיי? אז זו הסיבה הראשונה. שאני מדמיין בחלומות שלי, שאולי בעוד כמה שנים אנשים יקראו את הספר, ואם כן, זה כמעט בלתי אפשרי, אבל אם כן, אני מאמין באמונה שלמה שהם יקראו את זה בעברית, לא באנגלית. זה הסיבה הראשונה. סיבה השנית. אני גם כן מאמין באמונה שלמה שהחוויה, התרבות והחוויה יהודית בעצם חיה תרבות וחוויה לא רק חוויות יהודיות, אבל כל החוויות וכל התרבות הם חיים בלשון. הם חיים בלשון ומשוקע בלשונות מסוימות, והחוויה היהודית זה ממש ממש קשור בלשון, לעברית. אני מאמין את זה באמונה שלמה. הייתי בשבוע שעברה בהתחלה של המכבייה, וביבי נתניהו היה שם, והוא דיבר עם האנשים. והוא אמר, ברוכים הבאים לישראל. And he says, I assume you understood what I said. But if you didn't, learn Hebrew. ואני מסכים. Okay, it's okay to say. Like, I actually agreed with him about that. ואני בעצם חושב ואני מרגיש שהגרסה בעברית היא הגרסה המקורית, והגרסה שאני בעצם כתבתי זה התרגום. זה התרגום. Okay, I'll go back to English. Julie.
And in spite of your passion for Hebrew, I'm going to ask my question in
Please,
English. I hope you-
please.
And I'm
I'm
impressed,
much more eloquent in English.
I'm impressed that you think about the eternality of your book. I would have thought that just getting on the New York Times book list would have been one of the things that you would be striving for. So it's fascinating.
Well, I wasn't on the New York Times book list. And
It could, that's what I thought that authors are aiming for. Anyway, my serious question is, with the timing of your book, and October 7th, you had completed it before October 7th. Is there anything you would have written differently, given the catastrophe that was October 7th?
would have, I don't know. I mean, it's hard for me to imagine that if October 7th had happened and I decided to write this kind of book, I'm sure I would have made different choices in some ways. I mean, I don't know, because I was affected by it. And everything that happens in my life gets put in my book somehow. So I don't know how, but probably the answer to that is yes. Sometimes people ask the question, was anything substantively changed in the book? Because it was edited. It was submitted on October 3rd. My agent, who's the most amazing agent in the world, sold it like a month later. And she's Israeli, actually, which is astounding that she was doing that at that time. And then the editorial process was about a few months after that. It's, but nothing substantively changed as a result of October 7th. Nothing changed as a result of October 7th at all, actually. There were changes that were made after October 7th, but none of them were as a result of October 7th, and none of them were particularly major. So maybe that answers that question. But I think if I would have started, if I would imagine that, well, I would have started again, like now, I would not probably write the same book, but I can't tell you exactly how it would be different. What I'm working on now is not about anti-Semitism really at all. I need a break from that. Yeah.
Yeah, Simeon.
Yeah.
I'm asking this because we're on the cusp of Tisha B'Av, but
Yeah.
it's hard to imagine you weren't thinking about the destruction of the temple when writing about a book about Israel being swallowed by a black hole. So
Yeah.
How did that factor into your thinking about things, the greatest Jewish catastrophe of Jewish history, arguably? And B, more practically, for us as rabbis, how can we teach your book for Tisha B'Av?
Well, I'm not going to say it's permissible to read it on Tisha B'Av because you're only supposed to read like certain sections of whatever. I don't know if you're makpid about that or whatever, but it's dark. I mean, it fits into. I mean, it is a dark book. I think it's not only a dark book, but I think it's unquestionably a dark book. And I think, yeah, it could be interesting Tisha B'Av reading, I suppose. I'm not sure how I would teach. It's a good question. I don't know how I would teach it exactly. Did you ask, was I thinking about Tisha B'Av? Was I thinking about the destruction of the temple?
Yeah, were you in conversation internally with
I was
that
thinking
strange
about
architecture?
Sort of ruptures in Jewish history, and I was thinking about paradigm. I was thinking about ruptures that lead to new paradigms, and yeah, I was thinking about Tisha B'Av, and I was thinking about the expulsions, and I was thinking about the Shoah, and I was thinking about the Haggadah, and I was thinking about that sort of recurrent feature of Jewish life, which persists. I mean, to this day, so yes, I was thinking about all of those.
So a final question.
Just in light of your question or following up on it, two things. First of all, Benji, what you said about it being a Zionist book, I agree with you, and I think Herzl would have agreed with you completely. He would have interpreted this as, with all the there's no Israel, with all the anti-Semitism, you see, that's the need for it. So I think that's very
Endorsement.
it's but a practical suggestion. It won't be a time for a Tisha B'Av, but as I said, I'm working through the book now and finding it fascinating, and I think it might be a very interesting thing for our synagogue to do, to encourage people to read it and for us to get together again afterwards to discuss it with our own interpretations and feelings about it. So I'll volunteer.
So I will take this
And you can download it on Kindle, so it's very doable.
Yeah, I will use this as an opportunity to say that one of the plans for next year is to start a KMA book club.
Oh, great.
And this will be a great thing for the reading list.
Well, I can talk forever because I'm a rabbi and rabbis like talking, but thank you so much for
you. And considering that Pesach, you were saying, is your favorite holiday, and Pesach is, as we said, the storytelling, and here also in this version of the Haggadah is incorporated also October 7th within this Haggadah that of course also incorporates art and storytelling through the generations. I want to thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So
for
nice.
sharing
So
with us
this is so nice. Thank you so
your
much.
story. And how wonderful for our voyages to meet at this stop, and looking forward to continue on the next stop.
And just before we will finish, I will take this Passover note that Pesach is really very present both with Ben as a person and also in the book. Pesach is very present, and we are in the 3 weeks, and one of the keynote that we are saying in Tisha B'Av is the keynote that compares Betzetim Mitzrayim to Betzetim Yerushalayim, and I think in many ways this is the key that we are getting out, and we are also running away, and sometimes when we are getting out, we really don't know if it's Yetziat Mitzrayim or Yetziat Yerushalayim, and really your book helped us to connect these two together, and so I want to finish with a song that was mentioned already, and is really staying here and the ground of this book, and on the ground of how we the Jews dealing with the different distractions that we are going through. And this song is from the Haggadah Shel Pesach, Vehi She'amda, and this is the way that we would like to finish this evening. Just before the song, I will say that next Wednesday is Tisha B'Av. We are meeting as usual in the Tayelet at 8 p.m. For our annual Eicha reading and Kinot, and we will be very. It will be very important for us to celebrate it together. So please come, and I will say also one more thing that beside the topic and the wisdom that you, Ben, brought here, it's also highly important for us to have this conversation as a conversation that crosses the ocean between a conservative community here in Jerusalem and a conservative community here in New York, and we really hope that these bridges and these connections will really help us to go wherever we are going, and we will see where life will take us.
Thank you, Rosen.
Vehi she'amda, vehi she'amda, vehi she'amda, vehi she'amda, la'avoteinu ve'lanu, she'lo ha'echaviru, Amarteinu lechalotenu, she'lo ha'echaviru, Amarteinu lechalotenu, she'lechol toradot, Omdim aleinu lechalotenu, Omdim aleinu lechalotenu, ve'akadosh Masorti Movement, ve'akadosh Masorti